As somebody who in 2014 thought Transformers: Age of Extinction was such an absolute dumpster fire that I gave up on the franchise as a whole, this film, I think it's safe to say, is gonna bring Transformers back out of obscurity. Hi y'all, SnarkyJay Cosplay here with my review of Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Now for a little context, I was 7 years old in 2007 when the first Transformers movie came out, and I remember that end screen coming up after Optimus Prime's speech in Linkin Park's What I've Done was playing, and it literally blew my mind. And I watched most of them in theaters with my best friend, who's actually the one who went to both screenings of Transformers: Rise of the Beasts with me, so shout out to my best friend MIRETSBS. I'm gonna link you guys to his cosplay stuff in the description below. So for the non-spoiler part of this review, I'm gonna go ahead and give you guys my rating, which is a 7.5 out of 10. Transformers: Rise of the Beasts is easily one of the best Transformers films to date, and honestly I can admit that that's not saying much considering how awful most of the Bayverse movies are. However, I would actually rank this as tied with Transformers 2007, which is not only, I think, the best Transformers movie, but it's also one of my favorite movies of all time. I personally thought this movie was a lot of fun, and I thought it was really entertaining, but I say this with a disclaimer. This is a Transformers movie. It's not intellectual, and I didn't sit there watching it with the same nitpicky attitude that I usually watch Marvel and DC stuff. A lot of other content that I review is presented differently, but Transformers is and has always been an excuse to sell toys. It's robots that turn into cool cars and cool cars that turn into robots. And that's it. And that's kind of the attitude that you have to go into watching a Transformers film with, and that's what makes them such a guilty pleasure for me. I can turn off my brain and go, wow, truck, and just really enjoy what I'm looking at. Transformers: Rise of the Beasts has a runtime of about 2 hours, and it actually feels a lot quicker than that. The pacing makes it feel a lot more like your average 90-minute action flick, which I really enjoyed because sometimes you're just not in the mood for these 2.5 to 3 hour superhero flicks, so this definitely felt way more manageable. The story follows Optimus Prime, the Autobots, and the Maximals as they team up with some humans in order to defeat probably the biggest threat they've ever met, Unicron. This threat brings high stakes and drama for both our bots and our humans. In regards to our humans, I have to say I personally found them just a little bit annoying. To me, the top tier human character for Transformers is in fact Sam Witwicky. I think they all went to hell in a handbasket once we brought in Marky Mark. By comparison, our new human heroes Noah and Elena are much less annoying and a little more likable. However, I still like Shia LaBeouf as Sam Witwicky even more, and I will say that my dream for Transformers content is basically the first few minutes of Bumblebee where they're all just robots fighting on Cybertron. If I could get way less people and way more robot, I would be satisfied. Of course, when we're talking CGI robots, we really need some good vocal performances, and I have to admit, they were pretty solid in this film. I personally have always liked Pete Davidson. I thought he was a little much as Mirage, but I think that they've basically made Mirage what they always tried to make Bumblebee, so I'm not really sure how to feel about that. Liza Koshy, who I was very much prepared to find irritating, actually did a really solid job as RC. Ron Perlman as Optimus Primal is an absolutely incredible choice. What a voice on that guy, and he handles the script with an intensity that when you see it coming out of a big metal gorilla, it's maybe not as dramatic, but boy does he do great work with it. Of course, the highlight for me is the fact that they brought back the one and only Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. The guy's in his 80s and he still brings an intensity to the character that I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to replicate. On another note, the visuals in this film are actually really solid. All the CGI is way more polished and way more believable than anything I've seen out of Marvel or DC recently, so that's a really great note, especially considering that our most likable heroes are all robots. I will say though that even if this movie isn't as pretty and cinematic as any of the Michael Bay movies, every single bot is very much well animated and done with styling cues that very much trace back to their origins Predacons in G1. I basically loved every single Autobot and Maximal design in this, except for my new sleep paralysis demon, Wheeljack, which I will get into later. I will say that my biggest complaint when it comes to the bots is that we really didn't get enough of the Maximals, but I'll talk a little more about that later. The only things I really didn't like about this movie were, like I said, the humans can be a little bit annoying. We didn't get enough of the Maximals. Some of the dialogue is a little bit clunky, but I think some of the character arcs, like that of Optimus Prime, were absolutely prime.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Anyway, as a whole, I thought it was really fun, and I can definitely see Transformers Rise of the Beasts bringing Transformers back out of obscurity and into the mainstream, into maybe a property that's as big as Marvel or DC. Now again, my rating for Rise of the Beasts is a solid 7.5 out of 10. I saw it twice with my best friend both times, and we talked about this film ad nauseum. So that's all I can tell you without giving stuff away. Now I want to get into my little nitpicking here. So consider this your spoiler warning. From this point on, there will be spoilers for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. You've been warned. Now I have to say, even though he was intimidating to look at, our big bad Scourge is not really all that scary because a lot of his dialogue just seems very like standard cartoon henchman type stuff, because he kind of is. In this movie, the Terrorcon Scourge is basically a slave to Unicron, and if you compare it to the 1986 Transformers film, he's basically just taking the place of Galvatron. In 1986, Galvatron was the one serving Unicron. Now we've got Scourge doing it instead because no Decepticons appear in this film. Personally, I would have given anything to see the Decepticons in this film. I think the new designs are so cool that I would have loved to see what these animators did with the Decepticons. I mean, the whole thing of Transformers is Decepticons versus Autobots, and yeah, I'm glad we had Terrorcons and Maximals and all that stuff, but I want Megatron back, and I was really hoping that we would get a cameo from them, and there really aren't any Decepticons in this film, so that was really disappointing. I thought that they would at least set up a Decepticon appearance in the next ones, but it seems like we're gonna have to wait. Now, of course, Rise of the Beasts is very much based on Transformers Beast Wars, and both my best friend and I thought that there really wasn't enough of the Maximals in this film. In Beast Wars, all of the Maximals have very distinct, very strong personalities, and because we really didn't get much of them in this film because they kind of focused on characterizing characters like Mirage and Optimus Prime, we didn't get enough of the Maximals to really feel a real connection to them. On another note, in the movie, at one point, AirRaiser says that she, Rhinox, and Cheetor are all that are left of the Maximals, meaning that the two other popular Maximals, Rat Trap and Dinobot, have been killed off screen, which is kind of disappointing. At one point, Optimus Primal mentions being part of the Autobots' past and future, and he does continue with his introduction in saying that he was named after Optimus Prime. And of course, this is a reference to the original timeline established in Beast Wars. Optimus Primal and the Maximals are all from the future, but they actually have to go back in time to the past in order to stop some major threat on Earth. Now, originally, Optimus Primal is not named after Optimus Prime, but I did think it was sort of cute that they said this in the movie. Another must that was majorly lacking in this movie, there were no Predacons. There is sort of a little reference to them in the final battle. At one point, Unicron brings down these scorpion-looking generic robots. They look a whole lot like Scorponok, which is one of the major Predacons. But yeah, we get Terrorcons and Maximals, but no Predacons. I did bring up the bot designs earlier. The Maximals are actually super true to their Season 1 Beast Wars designs, except for the colors of Rhinox and Optimus Primal. They actually look really legit. And while Optimus Prime's design has changed just a little bit since we last saw him in Bumblebee, the guy is beautiful. He reminds me of his G1 design. He's well rendered. I love the mask. His face looks like Peter Cullen. He's just Sorry, Optimus Prime is my favorite. Anyways, in this movie, his transformation also looks a lot like the way you would transform his original G1 toy. It's really cool the way they did this. This design for B is super endearing. I really liked RC. She was mommy AF and very G1 in this movie. I will say I still think Mirage looks a lot more like Jazz than he should, but what can you do? Now, the one Meyer and I both cringed at was Wheeljack. This is Wheeljack in G1, a borderline Bostonian mad scientist slash engineer who doesn't give a fuck about OSHA regulations and is just willing to blow shit up. This is Wheeljack in Bumblebee, a modern take on a well-loved classic. And this is Wheeljack in Rise of the Beasts. Homeboy looks like he's got a permanent mac and cheese crust on the side of his lips. This dude makes Urkel look slick. Bro looks like he's got a thermos full of hot dog water in his backpack. Guy looks like he smells like pennies. I could do this literally all day. And he, for whatever reason, has now a very heavy accent. I guess they're gonna try and chalk it up to the fact that he's been hiding out in Peru, and he now has this thick, obviously Spanish-speaking accent, though he admits to not speaking Spanish. They had actor Cristo Fernandez play him. And if you're not aware, Cristo Fernandez is Mexican. He is not Peruvian. So he plays Wheeljack, a guy who originally sounded like he might have been from Boston with a heavy Mexican accent, which doesn't sound the same as somebody who is from Peru. Because shocker, not all Spanish speakers and people from Hispanic and Latin countries sound the same. Honestly, I know that I'm probably getting more irritated about this than I should on account of the fact that I am Cuban Puerto Rican, but this was just so ridiculous. Like, why change this character into something that was so cringe and unnecessary? But whatever, he doesn't have more than like 4 lines in the movie, so it's not like it really killed me. Another big reference to the 1986 Transformers movie is actually Mirage becoming a suit for Noah. They make exosuits for the Witwickies in this movie, and even though it's not the exact same deal, we do see the use of Cybertronian technology, which was pretty neat. And last but not least, I want to talk about that big shocker at the end, which is bringing G.I. Joe into this? So a little bit of history for you. Back in the day, Marvel was doing the Transformers comics, and because Hasbro also owns G.I. Joe, they actually crossed over. They also recently did so in the IDW comics run, but IDW no longer has the rights to make Transformers comics anymore. Since the release of Bumblebee, Transformers fans have been wondering if G.I. Joe was eventually gonna make a live-action crossover, but the Snake Eyes movie was such a flop for Hasbro that I think we all sort of figured that it was never gonna happen, but now here it is. That also ties into my next point. Near the end of the film, they mention that Unicron is still alive, still out there, and is likely to return. Rise of the Beasts seems to be the start of a new trilogy that is going to be very much Unicron focused, not entirely unlike 3 Transformers series, Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. In the comics, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and a number of other properties all team up in order to fight Unicron, but from the looks of it, these next films are just gonna be G.I. Joe and Transformers, and it seems like G.I. Joe is basically gonna take the place of Bay versus Sector 7 in order to team up with the Autobots to defeat Unicron again. Overall, for all its flaws and all my nitpicking, I really enjoyed watching this movie. Like I said, I loved the first Transformers movie in 2007, and when I was sitting there for my first viewing of Rise of the Beasts with my best friend to really take the whole film in, I felt like a kid again. And I gave it a second watch to make sure it wasn't nostalgia talking that made me enjoy the film as much as I did, and the second viewing really helped me hone in my thoughts. All in all, I think 7.5 out of 10 is a fair rating for this film. I personally am really hoping to see what is in store for the Autobots, and I'm so hoping they'll bring some Decepticons into the next one. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on Transformers Rise of the Beasts in the comments below.